How often have you come across a city council meeting, a local residents' show, or high school sports coverage while scrolling through your local PEG channels? PEG stands for Public Education and Government. Like the Needham channel, there are about 1,700 community access media organizations across the U.S. managing PEG channels. They focus on hyper-local events and issues and give community members a platform to create their own content.
Needham channel viewers, and welcome to episode 12 of Real Money Moves.
Interestingly, Massachusetts is home to around 15% of all community media in the country, the most of any state.
Massachusetts boasts over 250 community media outlets across the Commonwealth. Now, the only states with more than 100 are California and Texas. And those are states with populations that are 4 to 5 times higher than Massachusetts. So really, this is the hotbed of community media in the country.
And I'm calling the September 29th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order.
Community media is important for many reasons. First off, it is a window for the citizenry to look into the government under which it is ruled, which is great. It's a rare opportunity to see raw, undigested data.
We have a weekly newscast. We have a staff of people who seek out stories. We cover all of the municipal meetings, right? All of the boards. We engage and bring people in to create programming, both educational, governmental. So this is really an informational resource for the citizens of Needham to understand how the town works and to be engaged in the town.
State championship, unbelievable!
Local sports in any city or town across Massachusetts is really popular content. I'm proud of the coverage that community media is able to do. There are residents that maybe go south for the winter or they're relocated and they can still tune into a stream and watch their grandkids play a basketball game from 2,000 miles away.
The community media acts as a giant megaphone for the citizens of the town as well. I mean, everyone nowadays kind of has a YouTube channel. They have their social media in which they stand and they talk, but they don't really know that their voice is getting to people within their community. We basically act as a big microphone for them to kind of step on up to and have their visions heard. It's a great way for people to learn about what goes into media. So much of what we see nowadays is undigested. It goes right from the television into us without any question. Community media centers have a responsibility to kind of show people how that sausage is made and gives them an opportunity to view critically what they are consuming on a regular basis from the larger media providers.
But how did it all begin? In order to both promote and regulate the growth of cable TV in major metropolitan areas, in 1972, the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, introduced new rules for cable companies. One of these rules required cable providers to offer 3 free channels: one for local government, one for educational content, and one for public access.
So when the cable company comes into a town like Needham and uses public rights of way through telephone poles and underground conduits, those kinds of things, to sell their product, they are obligated to give back to the town in some way, shape, or form.
So the regulations and the whole process was designed to allow the towns and cities to negotiate a license and get benefit from making that access available. And one of the important pieces of that in the regulations is public access educational and governmental programming.
In 1984, Congress passed the Cable Communications Policy Act, which reaffirmed municipalities' authority to require PEG channels. This act also created a funding model through a franchise fee, allowing cities and towns to collect up to 5% of a cable company's gross revenue to support these channels.
So cable subscribers end up footing the bill for 90% or more, oftentimes much more, for community media stations in their community.
The biggest source of revenue is the 5% that the cable providers pay of the cable TV revenues.
The other areas in which we can receive funding is either through sponsorships, companies coming on in and offering in exchange for a donation, a mention at the beginning of a program or a series, that sort of a thing. We also are able to sell copies of our program either on DVD or on Blu-ray, but it is really just for the media itself and the service of copying the program that we can charge for that. And then through private donations as well. But all three of those venues represent a very, very small part and a very unreliable part of our revenue system.
However, with the television industry shifting towards streaming platforms, cable TV revenues have been affected.
Cable subscriptions are really on the downturn. In fact, they are down nearly 40% from the maximum. It's just sort of the way technology is going.
Because of that, the size of our revenue has shrunk over the years. We've been really lucky here in Needham in that we've had a very forward-looking board. They saw this trend coming for a while. We've always run a really tight ship here. So that has helped tremendously, but now we're beginning to see that we are slowly beginning to run into the red when it comes to our operational costs.
And they really differ across the state depending on the situation that the community media organizations find us in. They're not all not-for-profits. Many of them don't have what we've built in terms of an ongoing sustainable structure and a place. So depending on where they fall into the landscape, how many people, how quickly people are moving away from cable, they could be in very different situations.
Now, it's not one-to-one, so we're not seeing a 39% drop in funding. But it's also significant. There are a lot of variables involved there, right? So if the cable company raises their prices, then we're not seeing as significant a drop. And dependent upon the percentage that each municipality negotiates, up to 5%, it could be different in each town. But some community media centers are seeing losses of up to 20% in their funding, up to 15% in their funding. That's significant. That could be a part-time employee whose charge is covering some of those government meetings or covering some of those high school sports.
At the same time, municipalities are unable to benefit from the growing revenues of cable companies' broadband services.
The FCC has ruled that we are not entitled to any of the income that these cable television and broadband providers generate off of their streaming and data side of their business.
And what was essentially decided is that the licensing covers cable TV, not internet service. It did for a couple of years, but that was a long time ago. And that was there was quite a battle between cable TV providers and municipalities and local access on that. But eventually it was just cable.
And when that was implemented, that was kind of started the beginning of the decline of the revenues in which we received, because we're no longer getting the full amount that we once did.
Community media has done a terrific job of evolving itself. We're not just putting out things on standard definition cable. We have websites, we're streaming 24/7. We're sending out live content in HD. Several municipalities have HD cable channels as well.
And as people kind of stepped away from cable television, we've tried to meet them where they're watching. We just launched a channel on Roku, so that people who take advantage of streaming media can get a free channel of ours as well. One of the things that we had noticed in recent years, our community was not immune to the whole phenomenon where local papers were dying off because of the lack of being able to fund themselves within the community. We kind of jumped on in there and we launched a new news initiative within the past year called Needham Local, which will help to kind of fill that gap. We've been extremely lucky here in Needham to be very forward-looking and to be able to kind of smooth out the patch of rocky road that we're kind of currently on. But when you look at what we offer the town and look at how we're getting funded, there is a disconnect. There has to be another mechanism that is developed over time. What that mechanism is and what shape that is all yet to be determined.
Several states are working to pass legislation that would address community media's revenue gap. States like Vermont, Maine, New York, and Massachusetts are focusing on video services providers. Here in Massachusetts, a bill titled "Enact to Modernize Funding for Community Media Programming" is currently making its way through the legislative process.
Your Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all those big streamers are using the same exact infrastructure to deliver their product that cable is using. So they don't pay, yet cable does. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. To me, there needs to be a cost associated with doing business and giving back to the local municipality.
The bill originally proposed a 5% fee on digital streaming providers, but has since been revised to recommend an annual assessment aimed at restoring community access media revenue to its previous peak levels.
Hopefully we can get something passed, because otherwise I think we're going to start to see some layoffs. We've already started to see layoffs. We're going to start to see some closures and some regionalization of community media centers. There are some regional stations in Massachusetts. Plymouth area community television, or the local scene comes to mind, or 1623 Studios up in Gloucester, which covers several communities on the North Shore. And they do it well. But what makes Massachusetts unique and different is that hyper-local content, the Needham channel, which covers just Needham and Needham issues. You know, that's very important to the residents here.
We are facing a challenging time, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. One of the things that these challenges kind of provide us with on a community and on a broad level as Americans is to decide what's important to us, what's of value, what needs to change. Because nothing is going to stay the same forever, and that's true in any industry. It's an exciting time. It's always an exciting time to be in community media. It is something that is tremendously gratifying in terms of a career path, in terms of what we can offer to the community. And so it is kind of vital for us to figure these things on out, but it's a challenge that's worth taking on.